It had only been 4 days since the Bartlesome girl disappeared. The town searched from morning till dark every day. One time, Mary Beth McGee and her twin sister Margaret barely made it home before the mandated curfew. Everybody wanted to find that little girl. Where could she have gone? Her name was Lily Bartlesome, daughter of Hank and Betty, who both owned and operated the town's only feed store. With a town populated almost entirely of farmers, you can say they did well for themselves. Lily sometimes wore clothes from the exotic traders, with all the fancy buttons and fur collars, which made the whole school jealous. But even the jealous ones could not help but like the girl. She had a sweet aura about her that made you want to get to know her. Real inviting, like warm cinnamon rolls on the kitchen counter. She wasn't the kind of girl to run off, either. Lily knew better than to stray too far from home, especially with the stories folks whispered about the land beyond the wheat fields. The ones about the ghosts of old cattle rustlers, the buried bones of outlaws who never made it to trial, and the things that moved under the prairie moon, too tall to be men and too thin to be beasts. That was why the town had a mandated curfew, after all. Yet come sundown on the 4th day, just as folks were giving in to the awful realization that she might never be found, a sound carried over the fields. Faint at first, then rising above the rustling crops, a voice, soft, beckoning, calling for help. It was Lily, or at least, it sounded like her. The voice came from the dry well on the outskirts of town, the one folks swore had been empty since the last drought. The sheriff, lantern in hand, peered over the jagged edge, and the whole town held its breath. "Lily?" he called. There was a gurgling sound, followed by a cough, echoing up the well. The sheriff wiped a bead of sweat from his head with his handkerchief. "Damn it, little girl," he thought. "You better not be playing no games." Suddenly, the town bell began to chime, causing all the townsfolk to jump and exclaim. "Pah, the curfew," a voice chimed from the crowd. "Lily," the sheriff repeated. A ragged breath came from the well, then a soft whimper. "Please, help me." The voice sent a shiver up his spine. It was Lily's voice, sure as anything, but something about it was off. Hollow, stretched, like it had traveled too far to reach him. The townsfolk murmured behind him, shifting on their feet. The bell tolled again. A warning. The sheriff turned to Hank Bartlesome, whose face was pale as a sheet. "Go fetch a rope," he said. "We're getting her out of there." Hank hesitated, his eyes darting to the sky where the sun dipped just below the horizon. Curfew wasn't just a rule in this town. It was survival. No one stayed outside after dark. "Now, Hank," the sheriff barked, his voice sharper than he intended. "Your girl's down there, and I aim to get her out." Hank swallowed hard, then took off toward the feed store. The sheriff turned back to the well. He lowered his lantern, trying to see how deep it went, but the light barely touched the bottom. Just darkness, thick and unmoving. Then a noise. A scrape against stone, slow and deliberate. "I can almost reach," Lily's voice came again, closer this time. "Just a little more." The sheriff froze. No child could climb a well that deep. The bell tolled once more, the last warning before nightfall. The townsfolk began retreating, whispering among themselves, their fear palpable. Mary Beth and Margaret tugged at their father's coat. "Papa, please." Mary Beth pleaded. "We have to go." But the sheriff didn't move, because something was rising up out of the well. The sheriff gripped the edge of the well, his knuckles white. His breath hitched as a hand, small and pale, emerged from the darkness below, fingers trembling as they gripped the rough stone. "Lily?" He called again, though his voice was barely more than a whisper. The hand tensed, nails scraping against the rock. Then another hand appeared. Too long, too thin. The fingers bent strangely, like they weren't used to moving that way. The sheriff took a step back. The lantern in his hand flickered, casting wild shadows across the ground. The sheriff's voice was gone, his lips chapped. His tongue was too dry to wet them. A face emerged next. A face that looked like Lily's, but wrong. Her skin was too smooth, stretched too tight over her bones. Her eyes were wide, round, and black as a starless sky. Her mouth curled into a smile, but it was too big, the corners stretching unnaturally. And when she spoke, her voice had that same distant echo, like it wasn't coming from her throat at all. "Help me," she whispered. The sheriff staggered back, his instincts screaming at him to run. The last trace of sunlight disappeared. Behind him, the townsfolk slammed their doors shut. Curtains were drawn. Locks clicked into place. They knew better than to be outside after sundown. The sheriff knew better too. Yet he stood there, his feet refusing to move, staring at the thing that was pulling itself out of the well. It looked like Lily Bartlesome, but Lily Bartlesome had been missing for 4 days. And whatever this was, it had never been lost at all. The sheriff's heart pounded against his ribs as the thing that looked like Lily hoisted itself higher. Her limbs moved awkwardly, like a newborn calf finding its legs for the first time. The town was silent now, save for the wind rustling through the wheat fields and the faint, wet sound of something shifting in the depths of the well. "Lily," the sheriff tried one last time, gripping his lantern tighter. "What happened to you?" The thing cocked its head too far to the side, neck bending with a quiet pop. "I was waiting," it said in that same distant, hollow voice. "Waiting for someone to come get me." Something moved in the shadows beyond the well, low and slithering. The sheriff knew he should run, but his legs wouldn't obey. "You should come down," it said. "It's warm down here. They took care of me." "Who?" the sheriff croaked. The thing's black eyes glistened. "The ones under the dirt. They don't like to be alone." The sheriff felt the cold, creeping realization that whatever had taken Lily had changed her. Or worse, maybe it had only made something wear her skin. He took one slow step back, then another. His boot hit a loose stone, and he nearly lost his footing. The lantern swung in his grasp, the flame casting warped shadows across Lily's stretched smile. Behind him, a door creaked open. A voice, low, warning, called out, "Sheriff, get away from there." It was Hank Bartlesome, standing on his porch, rifle in hand. His face was drawn, pale. "That ain't my girl." The sheriff swallowed hard. He turned back just in time to see Lily tilt her head back, mouth stretching open far too wide, as if unhinging like a snake's. Then came the whispering. 100 voices, 100 echoes, all rising from the well, murmuring in some language older than the town itself. The sheriff didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, the lantern swinging wildly in his grip. Behind him, there was a low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a laugh. As he reached Hank's porch, the old man didn't wait. He fired a single shot into the air. then slammed the door shut the moment the sheriff was inside. The town bell rang again. Though no one had pulled the rope, the sheriff and Hank stood there in the dark house, listening to the wind howl. 4 days, Hank muttered, gripping his rifle so tight his knuckles turned white. That's how long it takes. The sheriff glanced at him. For what? Hank's jaw tightened. For them to send something back. Outside, the thing that looked like Lily Bartlesome was still standing by the well, still smiling, still waiting. And then, slowly, it turned and walked back into the wheat fields, disappearing into the night. While Lily's parents and friends mourned, the town never spoke of her again.